Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Oberlander, and I'm here to share a brief overview of Chapter 4 from the McDonald text, which involves implementing a test development plan. In this discussion, I'm just going to share a few of the key components of a test development process, and that's one, the thoughtful development, test blueprinting, student preparation. I'm going to offer an example that I created for my own course in regards to test blueprinting and the test development process for my course. And as well, I'm going to offer a few articles and a few websites for additional review. The first step in a test development plan is just that, properly planned. Carpenters, when they build something, they often say measure twice, cut once. And what that means is that they enter into it purposely, diligently determining what they're going to do before they actually take action. And in the process of incorporating exams and developing the exams for our courses needs to be entered with that same diligence. The three components of proper planning involve people, purpose, and program-minded. The people, the audience, the students, what cohort, what semester, where are they in their program. The purpose of the exam. Is it formative? Is it summative? Is it a pretest? Is it a quiz? Is it a comprehensive final? And being program-minded is the process of incorporating all the interactions that occur between students and other courses with what exams they have, what clinicals they have, what labs they have, and what's going on in those courses as well, as we're developing our own courses test plan, because we don't live in a silo. We might try, but we should put that mentality aside and really open up to being more program-minded in our planning process. The second phase, or the second part of test development, is a systematically structuring the test plan. The ability for an exam to assess and progress a student is based on its structure. So the three components of this are substance, strength, and scheme. The substance is the content of the test. What's being tested? How are the course objectives being tested and the content being tested? The strength has to do with the weighting of the content, the weighting of the course objectives, and how many questions are going to be angled or aimed at certain objectives, how many questions are going to be aimed at certain pieces of content during the semester. And that involves the strength of that exam. And then scheme has to do with all the different aspects of the actual format of the exam. The length, is it multiple choice, select all that apply, true and false, matching? Is it a performance exam? Is it a psychomotor exam? So considering the structure, we need to incorporate thoughts involving substance, strength, and scheme. In the test development phase, we need to consider being decently difficult. A test can be way too easy and tests can be way too difficult. We can have fair and valid and difficult exams. They just can't be too much on the ends of the spectrum. There needs to be balance. So in considering the development of a decently difficult test plan, we need to think about the destination, the discrimination, and the distribution. Destination has to do with what level of mastery we're trying to assess with this exam. Is it a criterion referenced exam or is it a norm referenced exam? Norm referenced exams are your standardized tests like the NCLEX. Those aren't designed for testing students in a class. They're covering exceptional amounts of information and they're looking for an average. They're looking for a bell curve on that. Whereas a criterion referenced exam is more for the classroom in that students are given content, they're given objectives, and then they're tested on how well they meet that content and objectives, which means that the distribution and the discrimination need to be evaluated differently as well. Between criterion and norm referenced exams. Norm referenced, bell curve. Criterion referenced, we're hoping that more students are leaning towards the high side because we taught well and they learned well. Oh, excuse me. And discrimination is as important as difficulty, and it's the ability to decipher between high and low achievers. And we look at individual questions in terms of discrimination of, if students, less than 30% of the students get it right, then it's probably too hard, and it's really difficult to evaluate high and low achievers between when majority of people get it wrong. And also on the other end, if more than 90% get a question correct, then it may be too easy. Now, it might be a straight up definition question where, we would hope that the majority of the cohort would get it correct, but we need to evaluate these too easy questions because they don't discriminate well between high and low achievers because almost everybody's getting it correct. Doesn't mean it doesn't belong on the test. We just can't learn about the discrimination from those kinds of questions. And then distribution, considering the curve, the mean, the median. Is it appropriate for that content? Is it an appropriate exam distribution for that course? And again, we're not looking for bell curves because this is not a norm reference test, but I've heard a lot of faculty say, oh, I had a good test, it was a bell curve. Well, maybe that means half the class was failing, or, even if it's a bell shape, but your median is on the high side, the mean is on the high side of passing, that means you still have a skew, which is fine. But we want to make sure that we're considering what that pass rate is. And if that's the middle of our bell curve, then maybe the exams are too hard. We need to consider, did we implement test blueprinting, or did we just pull questions from random places and then throw them at our students? So again, fair, difficult, valid. That's what we're looking for in a test plan. Fourthly, we want to be relevantly readying our students, and that involves 3 steps of relaying, reviewing, and rehearsing. We want to relay the blueprint to our students. We want to offer it to them so they have an idea of what's going to be covered in what amounts. And that's so that they don't feel tricked or duped or inappropriately challenged. Reviewing, we can do a pre-exam review where we do a tutoring session. But there's concerns of teaching to the test with that. So there's ways around that where, maybe a faculty will have a tutoring session, but they have the students bring the questions, and then the faculty are able to converse with the students without necessarily reviewing the exam before the exam occurs. And then even a post-exam review, which is very important to help students learn from their mistakes. And then thirdly, rehearsing. Quizzing. Quizzing is a great formative assessment. It gives students a chance with lower fear of grade implications, as long as the quizzes are entered into properly. And one thing that McDonald brought up is the issue with pop quizzes and almost their unethical relation to what education's supposed to be doing, because pop quizzes are almost penalizing or disciplinary in the way that they come across to students. So we need to consider maybe not doing pop quizzes and look at quizzing as that development phase instead of aha, I got you for not studying last night for this kind of that you didn't even know it was going to happen. Pop quizzes don't consider life, the 24-hour spectrum of a student's life. And not every student has the same ability each and every day to study. So we need to be open-minded to that. All right, so as an example, I did create a test blueprint for one of my courses as a result of this assignment. I have not done test blueprinting before. I have not been taught how to do it. And I really found this hugely beneficial, opening my eyes to maybe where I thought my tests were valid and decently difficult and had been planned, but in fact they had not. So this was a great eye-opening experience for me. The next few slides cover the details. The blueprint's going to discuss the course objectives and the percentage of those objectives and how many questions are covered for each of those objectives throughout the semester. It breaks down the lecture hours and then the percentage of questions and content from those different units, as well as even on the individual exams, breaking down how many questions on each exam come from those specific units. And then the next two slides discuss objectives. So going back and actually doing a cross grid with the X and Y axis where the units and the objectives meet. And this way, the test questions are aimed at meeting both throughout the semester. We're hitting the appropriate number of questions for our units, and we're hitting an adequate number of questions for our objectives throughout the entire semester. Worthy websites offering just a few additional resources. This first website involves a medical examination preparation and the blueprinting process for that, along with some examples. This next website provides 9 rationales to the importance of blueprinting in nursing programs. All things that, I think McDonald would support of preparing students for standardized exams, reviewing variety and using a variety of question formats, the planning process, and also the readying of students, preparing students for what they need to study, all in the hopes of increasing fairness, increasing validity of exams. This first article I'm providing discusses blueprinting in a 4-step phase. Identify major knowledge and skill domain, determine assessment objectives, decide the assessment format, and then the specific weightings. And again, with examples, many are very similar to McDonald's recommendations. And fourthly here, this second article is involving blueprinting, but it's involving Bloom's taxonomy. I think this would be a great addition to a blueprinting phase, one that looks at units, one that looks at lecture hours and objectives, but also looking at Bloom's taxonomy to determine, are we creating all remembering questions that, are too easy when that's all the exam is about? Are we creating all creation or evaluation, synthesis level analysis questions that are all going to be very difficult for students as they're growing in their knowledge and their understanding and their critical thinking? So adding Bloom's in really, I think, would balance out a test blueprint very well to make sure that we're having a variety of levels of critical thought, cognitive development. And lastly, I just put in this encouragement, Google the phrase test bank nursing free. And what you're going to find is students can purchase publishers' test banks cheaply, very cheap. And they use those. I've dealt with this in the past. And so just as a word of encouragement, if you do take questions from the publisher's resources, I strongly encourage you to evaluate your use of them. Are you tweaking them? Are you changing them? Are you using them just straightforward, just to make it easy for you? Or are you altering the questions if you do happen to use those resources? So again, just some additional worthy websites for your review. And lastly, just want to take a moment to share my own meaningful meditation. First, my personal evaluation is that I've never done this before. I feel like I've failed students in the past because I've never done this before. It hasn't been a job expectation. Maybe it's been an unstated job expectation, but I was never taught how to do it. And as we've learned, most higher level faculty went through and became faculty not because they got a degree in education, but because they furthered their practice degree. But that didn't mean that they were taught how to teach. And so I think this test blueprinting really is very, very important in helping develop valid, appropriate, planned, difficult, fair exams. Again, I have discussed this with other faculty, and many of my peers are not doing this either. And they don't know how. They're lost. They're afraid of doing it because they're not sure of the process. So we really need to get out and encourage others and share others and show others how to do this. And lastly, moving forward, I plan to do this in all my courses. I find this extremely, one, evidence-based and valid to help increase the validity, again, of my exams for both my own frame of reference as well as for the students, as well as for administration. That, you know, when somebody says, well, hey, was that a good test? I go, yes, I blueprinted it. I evaluated it. I did an item analysis on it, looking at discrimination. I looked at the distribution. It was an appropriate, it was fair, it was valid exam. And in the words of McDonald, evidence of validity is a matter of fairness and is closely linked to careful planning. So I hope that you found this presentation helpful, beneficial, and let me know if you have any questions. Have a great one. Thanks. Bye.